The wreckage burned across the frozen surface and sent black smoke into the thin atmosphere, where 3 distant suns painted the sky in shades of amber, and Violet Lieutenant Maya Cross pulled herself from the twisted metal of her escape pod and felt the cold bite through her thermal suit within seconds, and her breath came out in clouds that froze before they could dissipate, and she checked her oxygen levels and saw she had maybe 6 hours before the recycler would fail completely. The moon stretched endlessly in all directions, and mountains of ice rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, and she had studied the charts before the attack and knew this place was called Vareth Prime, and it orbited a gas giant in a system so remote that no human had ever set foot here before today. Her ship, the Wanderer, had been ambushed by raiders 3 jumps back, and she had barely made it to the escape pod before the hull breach swallowed half the crew, and the pod had limped through space for 2 days before gravity caught it and dragged it down to this frozen wasteland. Maya activated her distress beacon and knew it was pointless because no one would come, and no one even knew she was here, and the nearest human outpost was 40 light years away, and she had no faster-than-light communication and no way to call for help. She gathered what supplies she could from the wreckage and found a plasma torch and 3 protein bars and a medical kit and a thermal blanket that was torn but still functional. And she also found her service pistol and checked the charge and saw it had maybe 20 shots left. The wind picked up and carried ice crystals that stung her exposed face, and she needed shelter fast, or she would freeze before the oxygen ran out. And she scanned the horizon and saw nothing but ice and more ice, stretching forever. Then she noticed something strange in the distance and a structure that looked too geometric to be natural, and it rose from the ice like a dark finger pointing at the sky. And she estimated it was maybe 3 kilometers away, and she had no choice but to head toward it. Maya started walking, and each step crunched through the surface ice, and her boots were designed for ship corridors, not Arctic trekking, and already she could feel the cold seeping through the insulation, and her toes were going numb. She had been walking for maybe an hour when she saw the ship. It was half buried in a glacier, and its hull was sleek and curved in ways that human engineering never attempted, and the metal was a deep purple that seemed to shimmer even under the dim light of the 3 suns. And she recognized the design from intelligence briefings. The Vexorian Empire. Maya felt her heart rate spike, and the Vexorians were the most powerful alien civilization in this sector, and they had destroyed 3 human colonies in the past decade, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. And their warriors were known for being ruthless and efficient. She approached the ship carefully and kept her hand on her pistol, and the hull was cracked open in several places, and she could see scorch marks from weapons fire, and whoever had been flying this ship had been in a serious fight. Then she saw the tracks. They led away from the ship toward the same structure Maya had been heading for, and the tracks were fresh and made by boots that were larger than human standard, and she followed them because she had no choice, and whoever made them was heading to the only shelter visible on this entire frozen moon. The structure grew larger as she approached, and it was some kind of research station or outpost, and the architecture was definitely Vexorian, with those characteristic curved walls and crystalline windows, and the main entrance was open, and she could see faint light flickering inside. Maya drew her pistol and entered slowly. The interior was warmer, and some kind of emergency power was still running, and heating elements glowed along the walls, and she could see her breath, but it was not freezing instantly anymore, and she moved through corridors that were too tall for humans and designed for beings that stood at least 7 feet. Found her in the central chamber. The Vexorian Empress sat beside a small fire that burned in what looked like a ceremonial brazier, and her armor was cracked and stained with purple blood, and her helmet lay beside her, and Maya had never seen a Vexorian up close before. She was beautiful in an alien way. Her skin was pale blue and marked with silver patterns that moved like living tattoos, and her eyes were large and golden with vertical pupils, and her hair was white and fell past her shoulders, and she had 4 arms instead of 2, and the lower pair hung limp and injured. The Empress looked up when Maya entered, and her hand moved to a weapon at her side, but she did not draw it, and the 2 of them stared at each other across the fire. Maya kept her pistol raised but did not fire. The Empress spoke, and her voice was melodic, but the words were in Vexorian, and Maya did not understand them, and she shook her head and kept her weapon steady. The Empress seemed to understand, and she tapped a device on her wrist and spoke again, and this time a translator converted her words into accented English. "I will not attack if you will not attack." Maya considered this, and her training said to shoot first and ask questions never when it came to Vexorians, but her survival instincts said she needed shelter, and this alien had already secured the only warm place on this frozen rocks. She lowered her pistol slightly but kept it ready. Truce, the Empress nodded and gestured to the other side of the fire, and Maya moved around carefully and sat down, but kept her distance, and she could see now that the Empress was badly wounded, and purple blood seeped from cracks in her armor, and her lower arms hung at wrong angles. What happened to your ship? Raiders, and the same ones who destroyed yours, I think. And they attacked my patrol 3 days ago, and I was the only survivor. And my ship crashed here. And the Empress gestured to her wounds. And I have been trying to repair myself, but my medical supplies were lost in the crash. Maya studied her and knew this could be a trap. But the Empress looked genuinely injured and weak, and Maya made a decision that would either save her life or end it. I have a medical kit. The Empress' eyes widened slightly. And why would you help me? And your people and mine are at war. Maya shrugged. And because we are both going to die on this moon, if we do not work together. And I would rather die trying to survive than freeze alone in the dark. The Empress considered this and then nodded slowly. And honor demands I accept your offer with gratitude. Maya moved closer and opened her medical kit, and the supplies were designed for human physiology, but she had taken xenobiology courses and knew enough about Vexorian anatomy to make some educated guesses. She worked carefully and used the medical scanner to identify internal bleeding and applied synthetic tissue patches to the worst wounds. And the Empress hissed in pain but did not pull away, and Maya was surprised by how much they were alike under the surface, and blood was blood and bones were bones, even if the colors were different. When she finished, the Empress flexed her lower arms experimentally, and pain crossed her face, but she could move them again. You have my thanks, Inhuman, and I am Kalara, daughter of the Solar Throne and High Admiral of the Third Fleet and rightful Empress of the Vexorian Dominion. And in exile, Maya raised an eyebrow, and in exile, Kalara expression darkened, and there was a coup, and my brother seized the throne and declared me traitor, and I fled with loyal forces, but we were hunted. And now, and she gestured around, and now I am here. Maya processed this and realized she was sitting across a fire from actual alien royalty, who was also a fugitive, and the situation was absurd. And Maya Cross, and lieutenant in the Terran Exploration Corps. And my ship was destroyed by raiders, and I crashed here by accident. Kalara studied her with those golden eyes, and fate has a strange sense of humor, and to strand a human soldier and a Vexorian Empress on the same frozen moon. Maya could not help but smile slightly. And yeah, and strange is one word for it. They sat in silence for a while, and the fire crackled between them, and Maya checked her oxygen levels again and saw she had maybe 4 hours left, and Kalara noticed, your breathing apparatus is failing. Maya nodded, and yeah, and I have maybe 4 hours before I suffocate. Kalara stood slowly and winced at the pain and follow. Meshi led Maya deeper into the station and through corridors lined with strange technology, and they entered a room filled with what looked like life support equipment. And Kalara worked at a control panel for several minutes. This station was designed for long-term research, and it has atmospheric processors that can generate breathable air for multiple species, and I am activating them now. There was a humming sound, and vents along the ceiling began pushing air into the room, and Maya felt the pressure change, and after a few minutes Kalara gestured for her to remove her helmet. Maya hesitated and then unfastened the seals and pulled off her helmet and took a cautious breath, and the air was cold and tasted metallic, but it filled her lungs, and she could breathe. Thank you. Kalara inclined her head, and we are even now, and you saved my life, and I saved yours. They returned to the fire, and Maya broke one of her protein bars in half and offered part to Kalara, who examined it curiously and then ate it and made a face. This tastes like recycled hull plating. Maya laughed, and yeah. And welcome to human military rations. Kalara smiled, and it was the first time Maya had seen her do so, and it transformed her face and made her look younger and less intimidating. Over the next few hours they talked. Kalara explained how the Vexorian Empire had been stable for 3,000 years until her brother had allied with the war faction and seized power. And now the Empire was expanding aggressively and conquering everything in reach, and that includes human colonies. Kalara nodded, and yes, and I opposed the expansion. And I believed we should seek peaceful coexistence with younger species. And my brother called me weak and a traitor to our legacy. Maya studied her. And so you are not like the other Vexorians, and not all blood and conquest. Kalara shook her head. And the Empire is vast and diverse, and there are many factions and many beliefs, and those who seek peace are now hunted as enemies of the state. Maya understood that, and humanity had its own warmongers and politicians who saw every alien species as either a resource to exploit or a threat to eliminate. We are not so different. Kalara looked at her and no. And perhaps we are not. Night fell on the frozen moon and the temperature outside dropped to lethal levels, and Maya and Kalara stayed close to the fire and shared stories. Maya told her about growing up on a colony world where the sky was always orange and the oceans were green, and how she had joined the exploration corps because she wanted to see the stars and find new worlds, and maybe make first contact with aliens who did not immediately try to kill her. Kalara told her about the palace on the Vexorian homeworld, where she had trained since childhood to be a warrior and a leader, and how she had commanded fleets in battles against pirates and insurgents and earned the respect of her soldiers and the fear of her enemies, and then your brother took it all away. Kalara's expression hardened, and yes, and he took my throne and my fleet and my honor and sent assassins to ensure I would never return. Maya reached out without thinking and placed her hand on Kalara's upper arm, and the alien Empress looked surprised but did not pull away. We will survive. This and both of us, and we will find a way off this moon, and you will reclaim your throne, and I will get home, Kalara. Golden eyes met hers, and you have great confidence for someone stranded light years from help. Maya grinned. And confidence is all. I have left. They slept in shifts, and Maya took the first watch and kept her pistol ready, and she watched Kalara sleep and noticed how the silver patterns on her skin glowed faintly in the darkness, and how her breathing was deep and steady, despite her injuries. When Kalara woke to take her shift, Maya asked her about the patterns. They are called soul marks, and every Vexorian has them, and they reflect our emotional state and our connection to the universe. And when we are calm, they glow softly, and when we are agitated, they pulse and darken. Maya looked at her own arm, and humans do not have anything like that. And you always know what we are feeling. Kalara smiled, and not always, and humans are very good at hiding their emotions behind words and false expressions. Maya thought about that and realized Kalara was right, and humans lied constantly, even to themselves, especially to themselves. The next day, they explored the station together. They found storage rooms filled with equipment and supplies, and most of it was designed for Vexorian use, but some was adaptable. And Maya found environmental suits that could extend her time outside, and Kalara found weapons and communication equipment. The communication array was damaged, but Kalara believed she could repair it given time, and if she could get a signal out, she might be able to contact loyalist forces who would come for her. And what about me? And will your loyalists kill the human on sight? Kalara paused, and that is a valid concern, and I will make it clear you are under my protection, and any who harm you will answer to me. Maya raised an eyebrow. And your protection, and you think that will work? Kalara drew herself up to her full height, and Maya remembered she was talking to an Empress and not just a stranded soldier. I'm still Kalara of the Solar Throne, and my word is law among those who remain loyal, and they will obey or face my wrath. Maya believed her. They worked together for 3 days. Kalara repaired the communication array while Maya reinforced the station defenses and set up early warning sensors around the perimeter. And they fell into an easy rhythm, and Maya found herself enjoying the company. Despite everything, Kalara was brilliant and funny in a dry way, and she had a warrior's discipline, but also a scholar's curiosity. And she asked Maya endless questions about human culture and technology and philosophy. And Maya found herself opening up in ways she never did with other humans, and telling Kalara about her fears and doubts and the nightmares she had since the Wanderer was destroyed, and how she sometimes wondered if exploration was worth the cost. Kalara listened and did not judge, and shared her own doubts about leadership and the weight of command, and the terrible decisions she had made in battle and the lives lost because of her orders. On the 4th night, Kalara got the communication array working. She sent out a coded signal on loyalist frequencies, and then they waited. Maya asked her what would happen if the wrong people picked up the signal and if her brother forces found them first. Then we fight, and Kalara met her eyes, and we die with honor. Maya nodded, and she could accept that. They sat by the fire again, and Kalara seemed restless, and her soul marks were pulsing with agitation. What is wrong? Kalara was quiet for a long moment and then spoke. I have been thinking about what happens after we are rescued. And if we are rescued and you will return to your people, and I will return to mine and we will once again be enemies. Maya had been thinking the same thing, yet Kalara turned to face her fully, and I do not wish to be your enemy. Maya felt something tighten in her chest, and I do not wish to be yours either. They stared at each other across the fire, and Maya was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, and how Kalara golden eyes seemed to see right through. Her Kalara reached out with one of her upper hands and gently touched Maya's face, and her skin was cool and smooth. Among my people, and when two souls connect across great divides, and it is considered sacred and a gift from the universe itself, Maya leaned into the touch, and what about across species? Kalara smiled, and especially across species. Maya did not know who moved first, but suddenly they were closer, and Kalara had 4 arms, and she used all of them to pull Maya against her, and Maya wrapped her arms around the Empress and felt the alien warmth of her body and the steady beat of her hearts. They stayed like that for a long time. Eventually they pulled apart, and Maya saw that Kalara's soul marks were glowing brighter than before, and pulsing with colors she had not seen before. What do the colors mean? Kalara looked at her marks and seemed embarrassed, and gold means joy, and silver means peace, and red means, and she hesitated, and deep connection. Maya smiled, and deep connection. And I like that. They talked through the night and made plans that were probably impossible, and Kalara would reclaim her throne and end the war with humanity, and Maya would convince the Terran government to negotiate peace, and they would find a way to be together. Despite the light years and politics between them, it was a beautiful dream. In the 5th day, the signal was answered. A Vexorian ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel and entered orbit around the moon, and Kalara confirmed it was a loyalist vessel, and commanded by one of her most trusted officers. Maya felt relief and sadness at the same time. They gathered their few possessions, and Kalara sent coordinates for pickup, and within an hour, a shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere and landed near the station. The hatch opened, and Vexorian soldiers emerged, and they were tall and armored and carried weapons that could vaporize Maya where she stood. They saw Kalara and immediately dropped to one knee, and their leader spoke in Vexorian, and Kalara responded with authority. Then she turned to Maya and gestured, "Her forward, my soldiers, and this is Maya, cross of earth, and she saved my life, and she is under my protection, and any who harm her will be executed." And is that clear? The soldiers looked at Maya with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, but they nodded. Is understood, Empress. They boarded the shuttle, and Maya took one last look at the frozen moon where she had crashed, and where she had met an alien Empress, and where everything had changed. The shuttle ride to the ship was tense, and Maya sat beside Kalara and felt dozens of eyes watching her, and she kept her hand near her pistol, even though she knew it would be useless against this many armed Vexorians. Kalara noticed and placed one of her hands over Maya. "And be calm. And you are safe," Maya wanted to believe her. They docked with the main ship, and it was massive and sleek and filled with technology that made human vessels look primitive by comparison. And Kalara led Maya through corridors where Vexorian crew members stopped and stared and whispered. They entered what was clearly the command center, and a Vexorian officer approached and bowed to Kalara. "Empress, and we received your signal, and we have been searching for you for weeks, and we feared the worst." Kalara straightened, and "I survived, and thanks in part to this human," and she gestured to Maya. "And we must discuss the state of the rebellion. And is my brother still in power?" "Yes, Empress, and his forces control the homeworld and the core systems. And we have perhaps 40 ships remaining and scattered across the frontier, and morale is low." Kalara face hardened. "And then we must change that, and send word to all loyalist commanders, and we gather at the nexus point in 10 days, and I will address the fleet personally." The officer bowed, "And it will be done." Kalara turned to Maya. "And you will be given quarters and food and medical attention, and we will speak later." Maya nodded, and Kalara was back in command mode, and no longer the wounded soldier sharing a fire, but an Empress leading a rebellion. Maya was escorted to a small cabin that was still larger than any quarters she had on the Wanderer, and a medical officer examined her and treated her frostbite and gave her something that tasted horrible, but made the pain disappear. She was given food that was actually delicious and so much better than protein bars, and she ate until she was full and then collapsed on the bed and slept for 12 hours. When she woke, Kalara was sitting in a chair beside the bed. Maya sat up quickly. "And how long have you been there?" "Not long. And Kalara smiled. And I wanted to ensure you were recovering. Well, Maya felt warmth spread through her chest, and thank you. They talked for hours, and Kalara explained her plan to rally the Loyalist forces and strike at her brother's supply lines and weaken his hold on the outer systems, and eventually she would have enough strength to challenge him directly. And what about me, and what happens to the human? You rescued. Kalara looked troubled, and that is complicated, and my forces are loyal to me. But they are still Vexorian, and they still see humans as enemies. And if I simply release you, they will question my judgment. Maya understood. And so I am a prisoner. Kalara shook her head. And no. And you are a guest. But you cannot return to human space yet. And not until the political situation stabilizes. Maya felt frustration rise, and so what? And I just stay here indefinitely while you fight your war. Kalara met her eyes, and I know it is not ideal. But I cannot let you go. And not yet. Maya wanted to be angry, but she saw the conflict in Kalara's expression, and the way her soul marks pulsed with distress. Fine, but I want to help. Kalara looked surprised and helped how Maya stood and paced to the small cabin. And you said your forces are scattered and morale is low, and you need a victory and something to rally them. Kalara nodded slowly, and yes, Maya stopped pacing. And I know human tactics and human ship designs and human weaknesses, and if you are going to eventually negotiate peace with humanity, you need to understand how we fight and how we think. Kalara considered this, and you would help me fight your own people. Maya shook her head and no. And I would help you fight raiders and pirates and mutual enemies, and there are plenty of threats in this sector that threaten both our people. Kalara stood and approached Maya and looked down at her, and Maya was reminded again how much taller Vexorians were. You would do this, and even though you owe me nothing. Maya met her golden eyes. And I would do this because I care about you, and because I believe you can end this war, and because I have nowhere else to go. Kalara reached out and cupped Maya's face with both upper hands, and her touch was gentle. You are remarkable. Maya smiled, and you are not so bad yourself. Empress Kalara leaned down and pressed her forehead against Maya, and it was a Vexorian gesture of deep affection and trust, and Maya closed her eyes and breathed in the alien scent of her. They stayed like that for a long moment. Over the next weeks, Maya became an unexpected member of Kalara's inner circle. She attended strategy meetings and offered insights on human behavior and psychology, and helped Kalara understand how Terran commanders thought and what tactics they might use. The Vexorian officers were skeptical at first, but Maya proved her worth when she identified a trap in what looked like an easy target and saved the fleet from an ambush after that they started listening to. Her Kalara fleet grew as more loyalists answered her call, and they struck at supply convoys and liberated stations held by her brother forces, and word spread that the rightful Empress still lived and still fought. Maya fought alongside them. She learned to use Vexorian weapons and wore adapted armor, and stood on the bridge during battles and watched Kalara command with absolute authority. And she saw why the Vexorians followed her. Kalara was brilliant and ruthless when necessary, but also merciful, and she treated her soldiers with respect, and mourned every loss, and inspired loyalty through action rather than fear. Maya found herself falling deeper. They stole moments together between battles, and Kalara would come to Maya quarters late at night, and they would talk and hold each other and try to forget the war for a few hours. Kalara taught Maya about Vexorian culture and history and art, and Maya taught Kalara about human music and literature, and the strange ways humans showed affection. They learned each other languages, and soon they could speak without translators. And Maya loved the sound of Vexorian flowing from Kalara's lips, and Kalara said she found human English fascinating in its complexity. 6 months passed. Kalara forces controlled a quarter of the outer systems, and her brother was finally taking the rebellion seriously and sending his best commanders to crush her. The battles became more intense and the losses mounted, and Maya saw good soldiers die and felt the weight of it own night after a particularly brutal fight where they lost 3 ships and hundreds of crew members. Kalara came to Maya's quarters and collapsed. Maya held her while the Empress cried, "I cannot do this, and I am leading them to their deaths, and I am not strong enough." Maya stroked her white hair and spoke firmly. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, and your people believe in you, and they follow you because you give them hope, and you are going to win." This Kalara looked up at her with those golden eyes that were wet with tears. "And how can you be so certain, Maya?" smiled, and because I believe in you too, Kalara kissed her then, and it was desperate and fierce and full of all the fear and hope and love they had been holding back. They made love that night, and Maya learned that Vexorian skin was cool to the touch, but warmed under her hands, and that Kalara had 4 arms and knew exactly how to use them, and that the soul marks glowed brightest during moments of intense emotion. Afterward they lay tangled together, and Kalara traced patterns on Maya's skinny love. You may across, and I know it is impossible, and I know we come from different worlds, but I love you. Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks, and I love you too, Kalara, and Empress or not, and Vexorian or not. And I love you. They held each other and knew that morning would come and the war would continue, and the universe did not care about 2 souls who had found each other across impossible divides. But for that night, they had each other, and it was enough. The final battle came 9 months. After Maya had crashed on the frozen moon, Kalara had gathered her full strength and 70 ships and 30,000 loyal soldiers, and she made her move against the homeworld. Her brother had been waiting. 200 ships dropped out of faster. Then light around Kalara fleet, and Maya saw them on the screens and felt her stomach drop. They were outnumbered 3 to 1. Kalara stood on the bridge, and her soul marks pulsed with determination, and she addressed her fleet warriors of the true Empire. And today we fight not for conquest but for justice. And my brother has corrupted everything our ancestors built, and he has turned the Empire into an engine of oppression and tyranny. She paused and let her words sink in. We may be outnumbered, and we may die today, but we will die free, and we will die knowing we fought for what was right, and if the universe wills it, and we may even win. Maya stood beside her, and Kalara glanced at her. Stay on the flagship and stay safe. Maya shook her head and no. And we fight together or not at all. Kalara smiled, and it was fierce and beautiful and very well. The battle was chaos. Ships exploded and weapons, fire lit up the void, and Maya watched the tactical displays and called out targets, and Kalara commanded with absolute confidence even as their numbers dwindled. They lost 20 ships in the first hour, but Kalara had a secret weapon. Maya had helped her design a computer virus based on human cyber warfare techniques, and it was uploaded into her brother flagship during a brief communication exchange. The virus spread through the enemy network and disrupted their targeting systems and created confusion, and suddenly the 3 to 1 odds were not quite so overwhelming. Kalara fleet pushed forward and fought with desperate courage, and slowly and impossibly, they began to turn the tide. Maya saw an enemy cruiser lining up a killing shot on their flagship, and she grabbed a weapons console and fired without thinking, and the shot connected and the cruiser exploded. Kalara looked at her with surprise and pride. Well done. The battle raged for 6 hours. In the end, Kalara brother flagship was crippled and drifting, and his fleet was scattered and retreating, and Kalara had won. She ordered her ships to pursue but not to destroy, and to offer quarter to any who surrendered. Thousands did. Kalara took a shuttle to her brother flagship, and Maya went with her. They found him on the bridge and wounded, and defiant Kalara stood before him and looked down at the brother who had betrayed her. You lost in surrender, and I will be merciful. Her brother spat purple blood, and you are weak, and you always were, and you care more for aliens, and he glared at Maya and than for your own people. Kalara expression hardened, and I care for all people, and human and Vexorian and every species in this galaxy, and that is not weakness, and that is strength. She gestured, and soldiers took her brother away. Kalara turned to Maya. And it is over, and the war is over, and I have won. Maya smiled, and you won, and now comes the hard part. Kalara raised an eyebrow. And what is harder than winning? A war. Maya laughed, and keeping the peace, Kalara was crowned Empress in a ceremony that lasted 3 days, and representatives from dozens of worlds attended, and Maya stood beside her and wore formal robes that Kalara had commissioned specially for her. The Vexorian people were shocked to see a human at their Empress side, but Kalara made it clear, this human saved my life, and she helped me win the war, and she has earned her place here. And any who question this will answer to me. No one questioned it. Kalara. First act as Empress was to open negotiations with the Terran government. It took months of careful diplomacy. But eventually a peace treaty was signed, and hostilities between humans and Vexorians officially ended, and trade routes were established, and cultural exchanges began. Maya became an ambassador. She traveled between human and Vexorian space and helped both sides understand each other, and worked to build bridges between species that had been enemies for decades, and always she returned to Kalara. They made it work, despite the distance, and despite the politics and despite the 1,000 obstacles in their way. Kalara ruled her empire with wisdom and compassion, and transformed it from a conquering force into a beacon of cooperation and peace. Maya eventually retired from her ambassadorial duties and moved to the Vexorian homeworld and lived in the palace with Kalara. They had many years together. They watched as humans and Vexorians became allies and then friends. And eventually the distinctions between the species mattered less and less. They grew old together. Vexorians lived longer than humans, and Kalara knew she would outlive Maya by centuries. And it was a source of quiet sorrow between them. On Maya's final day, Kalara held her. "I do not want to lose you." Maya smiled and touched Kalara's face. "And you will never lose me, and I will always be with you and in your memories and in your heart, Kalara." Tears fell, and they glowed with the same colors as her soul marks. "I love you, Maya Cross, and I will love you until the stars go cold." Maya closed her eyes and whispered, "And I love you, Kalara, and thank you for finding me on that frozen moon, and thank you for everything." She died peacefully. Kalara mourned her for a year, and then she returned to her duties, and she ruled for 3 more centuries, and guided the alliance of species that grew from the peace she and Maya had built. And every night before she slept, Kalara would look up at the stars and remember the human who had crashed on a frozen moon and who had changed everything. She remembered the fire they had shared and the way Maya had looked at her without fear, and the love that had bloomed between impossible odds. And she smiled because she knew that somewhere among those infinite stars, Maya's spirit was free and at peace, and that one day when Kalara's own time came, they would meet again and share another fire, and this time nothing would ever separate them. The end.